Hello, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the parent orientation for the Northeast ISD classes that Culturingua is offering this summer. Spanish at home at the zoo and with friends for ages 5 to 8, and Spanish through Hispanic Countries Cultural Trip for ages 8 to 12. This meeting is being recorded. If you do not consent to being recorded, please leave the meeting. Our agenda today is we're going to go over some welcome and introductions, go over the curriculum methodology that Culturingua follows. We will talk about how Culturingua tracks your child's proficiency, what to expect from these two courses, what's next for my child, and Q&A. And if there's any questions throughout, feel free to ask as well. So Culturingua is a nonprofit organization based here in San Antonio that teaches languages and cultures to children ages 4 to 14. We teach Spanish, French, and Arabic, and our goal is to prepare future generations for an increasingly globalized world, and by making language learning fun and easy. And we use a lot of songs, games, cultural activities, movement, art, and more to make the lessons both fun and engaging as well as effective. A little bit about the founders. I'm one of the co-founders. My name is Nadia Mavrakis. I'm also the executive director as well as a French teacher. My background is in finance and business strategy from the University of Texas in Austin. I also have a minor in French, and I studied in Paris at HEC Paris for a semester in my undergraduate degree. I worked for 9 years with Accenture in business strategy consulting in the oil and gas industry before co-founding Culturingua. And the other co-founder is Nader Mehdoui, who is also the chief operating officer as well as one of the Arabic teachers. And he is native in Arabic, and he is a civil engineer by background and training, and worked in geotechnical engineering for a number of years, and now is also focused fully on Culturingua. I'll briefly introduce our leadership as well as the Spanish teacher for this week's courses. So Cindy Dorsey is our curriculum director as well as an Arabic teacher. She's a veteran teacher, having worked in education for over 24 years. She has her master's in applied linguistics with a focus on effective strategies for teaching foreign languages to young children. And among other experiences, she was the head of faculty at a school in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates for 6 years, where she taught English to native Arabic speakers. Miriam Hernandez is our Spanish director. She also is a veteran educator of 24 plus years. She taught high school Spanish in Harlandale ISD here in San Antonio. She taught at levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as AP. And she has her master's in Hispanic literature. Jose Pagan is the Spanish teacher for the NEISD courses this week. He has taught with Culturingua in numerous classes at private preschools and private elementary schools at Northside ISD, Northeast ISD, as well as at a public program at the Parman Library in Stone Oak. He's originally from Puerto Rico, and he has his master's in communication. So a little bit about Culturingua's approach to learning languages. So many of you I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, studied a foreign language in high school or at some other point in your life, and more than likely you studied it using what's known as the traditional approach, which is still taught in many high schools and other schools across the country. It's a teacher-centered class. There's a lot of focus on teaching about the language in terms of teaching about grammar. You cover a textbook fully as the curriculum. and you may learn some isolated cultural factoids. However, there's a gradual shift taking place that is promoted and followed by the American the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, the ACTFL or ACTFL, which I'll reference it as later in this program, and which Culturingua also follows, this proficiency-based approach where students are actually learning to use the language in class. And it focuses on 3 modes of communication: interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. We'll talk more about that. There's a lot of focus from a cultural perspective on the relationships between people and their practices, and how someone would interact with people from other cultures. And really it's a big focus on teaching in the target language. So ACTFL also recommends that 90% of class time is taught in the target language, which I'll talk about more in a little bit, but that's also a principle that Culturingua follows. And it's about getting students to become proficient in the language and being able to actually communicate, rather than teaching them about the language or teaching them how to conjugate verbs and things like that. So that's a little bit of background about the proficiency-based approach. And this is a little bit about our teaching cycle for each lesson. And so we follow a research-based approach called the Gradual Release of Responsibility Instructional Framework, which shows a gradual transition you can see from teacher responsibility at the beginning of the lesson to student responsibility at the end of the lesson. So for example, at the beginning, we'll have a focus on comprehensible input, which is teaching children or students new vocabulary words or new phrases. And that's really a lot of that is focused on the teacher doing the direct teaching of what these new words are that students will be learning, and that's the focus of the lesson. Then we move into low stress output, and this is opportunities where students will do things in a group setting. For example, they'll show that they either can receptively understand words that are being words that are being said, or that they can express in a group setting. So for example, they might do games that they collectively answer or respond, or they might do songs together with a teacher based on songs that they know in English but that are taught in the target language using the vocabulary. Then we move into structured interaction. So this is focused more on the students having the opportunity to speak express themselves individually, but still in a group setting. So these are being further games or activities where they will have the opportunity to show that they understand and can communicate using the target language. And then the last one is extension activities, which is you do it alone. So this might be something like the students will have a pair up and they will go through an article, a current event article on a particular topic, and that's related to the theme, and they will work together to figure out what the words mean, or they might write a postcard about a place that they visited using some sentence stems that this teacher would provide. So that is really more, that's sort of student-led independent learning. So that's the cycle that we follow throughout all of our lessons. And this is a sort of a formula for authentic foreign language development. We use a lot of gestures in our courses. This is known as total physical response, where students use gross motor movements, and they can associate it with the new vocabulary words, and research has shown and experience shows that they're better able to recall those words. So for example, you teach them a gesture, and then in the future they might not recall what that a gesture associated with a vocabulary word. Then later they're trying to recall that vocabulary word, say a few days later, a week later, they can't remember it, but then the teacher does the gesture to remind them, and then instantly they can remember what the gesture is. So you can see here some examples of the gestures that we use in class related to commands, or asking the things that we ask the students to do actively in class as we go through, but we also use gestures for our thematic vocabulary, which I'll discuss in a little bit. As I mentioned, we follow the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages guidelines, and so all of our objectives are based on those standards. You can see here the progression, the proficiency progression from novice to intermediate, advanced, superior, and distinguished that the ACTFL measures, and then within each of those there's a breakdown of the level from low, mid, to high. And as I mentioned, that ACTFL recommends that communication in the target language should be at least 90% of the instructional time by the time the students reach the novice mid-level. These courses are both introductory classes, so we aren't necessarily going to use 90% class time only in the target language, but we will be using a majority of the class time in the target language as much as possible, so that the students can really absorb as much as they can and acquire as much as they can. And the 10% of English that the ACTFL reserves there is for things like if you're teaching new vocabulary words that are difficult to gesture or difficult to show with a picture or some other visual, then you're able to use English. Or if you're explaining the instructions to a activity and you want to make sure that they're understanding what they need to do in that activity, you may use some of that time for English, for example. We also follow the ACTFL's can-do statements, which are how ACTFL measures students' proficiency progress. So you can see here for the novice level what the proficiency benchmarks are across 3 modes of communication that I mentioned: interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational, as well as the 2 facets of intercultural communication, which are investigate and interact. And then there's a number of performance indicators. And all of our curriculums are based on this, as well as how we measure student progress and how you and your child can also measure their own progress. And I'll talk about that next. So Culturingua has a custom can-do progress system that is based on those can-do statements and standards that I just showed. And so the way this works is that in each course that a student takes, they will earn a certain number of can-do stickers, and 1 class hour is equal to 1 sticker. So, and they all align to one of the modes of communication, as well as to one or two of the skills of either speaking, listening, reading, or writing. So for example, the first one is interpretive listening novice. I can perform common actions when asked, such as jumping, walking, and running. And so that's one of the interpretive listening stickers that the students in the Spanish at Home at the Zoo and Friends and with Friends course will receive at the end of this week. And then they'll receive a booklet where they can collect all of these badges, all of these stickers. And once they get the right number of stickers, they're able to earn these badges to say that they've mastered at the novice low level the interpretive listening skill for Spanish, for example. Then once they collect all of the badges, then they're able to take an assessment to measure their where they stand against those skills, and then they can earn a medal that says that they are a Spanish novice low communicator. So this system is modeled after a national system called the Seal of Biliteracy Elementary Pathways Program that's implemented by a state's education board. So for example, the state of California, as well as numerous other states, have this program that helps students become on the bilingual path and encourage them. Unfortunately, we don't have that program in the state of Texas through the Texas Education Agency. So we wanted to have something that could encourage students to move along that proficiency journey, and so we created this, and it can help you and your child track their progress. Similarly, for the two intercultural facets that I mentioned, investigate and interact, we also have a system. So in courses, they'll also receive intercultural badges, and so and then, or stickers rather, and then they can collect badges, and then instead of an assessment, they would do an intercultural challenge, such as read 10 books in Spanish or attend a Hispanic cultural event, and then earn a medal in intercultural communication. Now we want to move into the themes of the courses for this week. So the themes covered in Spanish at Home, at the Zoo, and with Friends, which is for ages 5 to 8, from 8:15 to 10:15, Monday through Friday this week, are, as you can see, listed. So on Monday, we'll learn about how to introduce yourself, talk about interacting with peers at school, learn about body parts and opposites. Tuesday, we'll learn about action verbs and emotions. Wednesday, we'll learn about colors and animals, and this, for colors, we also use the book, The Color Monster, which talks about emotions that a monster feels, that ties back to the emotions lesson, but also introduces the colors, which then sets the path for the animals lesson, which is focused around the book Brown Bear, which all of the animals in Brown Bear are different colors, and we learn about animals. Then on Thursday, we learn about family. We read a book called La Familia, and we learn about rooms in a house and day and night, and we read a book called Bear at Home. And then on Friday, we learn about fruits and days of the week. This is tied to the book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. And we also learn about transportation and go on a cultural trip to Mexico. We will have a final showcase on the Friday, June 28th, from 10:05 to 10:15. So that's just the last 10 minutes of class for your students. And then in each one of these lessons as well, for each day, we also sing 1 to 2 songs that tie to the themes that are taught that day. And so you'll get a CD of all those songs tomorrow, Monday, when you pick up your child, and you can listen to them throughout the week. And it's a way, and beyond, and it's a way for your child to help them remember the vocabulary. For the next course, which is Spanish through Hispanic Countries Cultural Trip, this is for ages 8 to 12. It's from 10:30 to 12:30 this week. And so in line with the ACTFL intercultural communication guidelines that I went through earlier, we really aim to provide authentic opportunities for students to learn about issues that affect the countries that they're visiting this week, which I'll show in the next slide, on a virtual trip, while also learning and using Spanish, rather than present a class just on cultural factoids or cliches. And so we really wanted to make this a really authentic course that they can really take away and know more about what the people in these countries how they live and what they experience. So as such, we've tied the overall theme to this course to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which you can see here. There are 17 of them. We've chosen a handful of them to focus on for the course this week. So we'll go through that on this slide. So on Monday, we're going to go to Mexico. So first, we'll spend some time learning about traveling, the vocabulary, introducing ourselves. We'll make passports. How do we use passports? How to go through passport control, things like that. Then we'll learn about Frida Kahlo and the self-portraits that she is so famous for. We'll learn about the vocabulary related to colors and art supplies, and do activities associated with that, and briefly touch on Frida Kahlo's role in paving the way for future female artists. On Tuesday, we'll visit Argentina. We'll spend a lot of time learning about weather, how weather in South America is the opposite seasons-wise of the weather in North America. What are clothing that you're going to need for different weather situations, and then how Argentines view weather and how it's changing in the world. On Wednesday, we'll visit Colombia, and we'll talk about animals of the Amazon rainforest, how they move, where they live, threats that they face, and how they will focus on animals that are either on the watch list or somewhere on the endangered spectrum. We'll also learn about a recent court case that better protects the Colombian Amazon. On Thursday, we'll visit Costa Rica. We'll learn about how to shop in a market. We'll learn about currency and counting, and also about sustainable tourism in Costa Rica. And on Friday, we'll visit Cuba. We'll learn about fruits and other foods, about Cuban music, about the current event related to the food shortage in Cuba that's currently going on, and the importance of portion control. And then for this class, we'll also have a final showcase on June 28th from 12:20 to 12:30. Again, that's the last 10 minutes of class. How to support your child at home. So every day you'll receive a parent letter that explains the thematic vocabulary that we learned for the day. So for example, whether that's the colors or the animals or days of the week. We'll also tell you about the functional vocabulary. So those are things that we don't actively teach as a new vocabulary word, but that we use them in context so that the students can learn them. So for example, it's what color is blank, or I see blank, I see in this animal, or things like that. So it's functional vocabulary that's used throughout the activities. You also will see the objectives, cultural components, and I didn't mention that on the Spanish through Hispanic, the Spanish at Home, at the Zoo, and with Friends course, even though we do go on a cultural trip to Mexico at the end, there's actually cultural components embedded throughout the day, or throughout the week and each of the other days, and also how you can reinforce this at home. We also would love if you listen to and practice the songs for Spanish at Home, at the Zoo, and with French course, the CD that we'll send home with you tomorrow. Not only will that sort of prepare them for the songs as they listen to them throughout the day, but also prepare them for the final showcase. What's next for your child on their proficiency journey? So we encourage you to be an advocate for your child as they progress along the proficiency journey. And whether that's in wherever that may be, whether they're in a dual language program, if they continue courses through us or through as an extracurricular, and as they move into middle school and high school, where they will have the opportunity and the requirement to study a foreign language. So and we would love for you to continue, your child to continue courses with us and continue their proficiency journey. So in the fall, we're offering evening classes in partnership with Northeast ISD Community Ed. We'll be teaching Spanish through the story of Cinderella at Churchill High School on Thursday evenings, and French through the story of Cinderella at Reagan High School on Wednesdays, if you're interested in French. We also will be offering evening classes in partnership with the Magic Theater at the Magic Performing Arts Center at I-10 in Jizabala. Those will be taught, part of the course will be taught, or part of the class time will be taught by a Culturingua language instructor, and part of the course time will be taught by a Magic Theater artist. So that's going to be a really awesome opportunity to be really learning about theater and language at the same time. And for students in Northside ISD, we are offering after-school classes in select elementary schools from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So we encourage you to ask us any questions that you have at any time. Jose will, of course, be there all week for you to ask questions. I will be there on most days, as will Nader Mehdoui, the other co-founder, on many days. So, and we're always accessible via email or phone call. So thank you for joining and watching this, and we look forward to working with your child this week. Thank you.